hot off the heels of our environmental episode. So yeah, 2 episodes ago now, we did our environmental episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Big E episode. Hot off the heels. So I guess a lot of big networks have caught wind that we did a Big E episode, and you know they're kind of following suit. So yeah. I don't know if you browsed Netflix recently, but there is a new documentary that's trending called Seaspiracy.
Yes, I've heard of this. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't even remember what it's about. It's like I
think it's oceans, but I think specifically fishing.
Yeah, and how crazy the industry is, and all that stuff like that. Yeah, like really.
Wasn't there a cow one? Was there not a cowspiracy?
Was there actually? Is it the same people?
I don't know if it's the same people, but that's weird if they would name it the same thing. But I'm pretty sure there's a cowspiracy.
Okay. Well, it's interesting you bring that up because cowspiracy kind of sounds a little funny, and I was thinking like, you know, Seaspiracy just sounds a little bit not great either. Like the title kind of sounds. I didn't know there was a cowspiracy, but Seaspiracy, I was like, this sounds a little stupid. I feel like there's a better pun or something like that they could have made, and then I realized there's a way more obvious title that this thing could have been. Okay, they went with Seaspiracy. Can you think of a way better pun that would have worked for this?
Like the same subject matter, just a different
exactly,
name?
Exactly. Water, sea, ocean.
I don't know. No.
So I was thinking, couldn't they just have called it Conspiracy? Like wouldn't that have been way more brilliant than Seaspiracy?
Maybe that is too late in the word for people to catch on.
Maybe
because of how like attention deficit people are these days.
Yeah.
You're just looking through Netflix, right?
2 syllables beyond. Yeah. It's like it's too much.
Exactly.
Too much. Or maybe you're right.
I did look it up. Cowspiracy is I don't know if it's the same people, but it is a thing. It's also on Netflix.
Maybe it is the same. Maybe they want to keep the same branding because Conspira Cow wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
So, but I just think like I remember looking at that title. And I was like, man, okay, this documentary actually seems pretty cool. Seems like something I'd want to watch.
Yeah.
But I was like, the name just sounds kind of stupid to me. And then I realized later on that Conspiracy would have been so clever, and they should have went with that.
Yeah.
Anyways,
they should write into Netflix. You know, they should get you to.
Well, I mean,
name these.
I mean, I'm surprised they didn't reach out to us. I mean, the fact that they're already like copying us from doing kind of on the Big E wave, like I'm surprised they didn't reach out to consult with us. So, anyways, welcome everybody to the ETC podcast, your one-stop pod for entertainment, technology, and cars and all things random. My name is Casey Lee, and sitting across the city from me, as always, is
Aaron Senenkar.
It is episode 64 on this wonderful Thursday, April 8th, 2021, the third last episode, the penultimate, like the penultimate episode of the season 7. Yeah. That's right. We only have 2 more episodes after today, but we have episode 64, jam-packed, jam-filled, traffic jam, jam city, whatever episode today for you guys.
You know, something I just realized, I don't know if we talked about this, but I think, I forget the date that we had said the last episode is.
Okay.
But I think it's, is it April 22nd? Is that a Thursday? That is actually Earth Day. So this is kind of...
No way.
This is kind of coincidental, but no, actually totally planned. This is...
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, even if it wasn't, maybe there was some subconscious like that you decided, hey, maybe we should think about ending it on Earth Day. All right.
Exactly.
So it's the Earth season that this episode is all about. All right, let's start with some news here. Still Earth related, actually. This is a total Earth season here.
It is Earth month, right? I think it's not just Earth Day. I think it's also Earth month.
Oh, well, there you go. It's Earth month. So again, following suit, Netflix already kind of went our route, and Apple TV is now going our route. So Apple TV has a new documentary with Sir David Attenborough. So another David Attenborough thing. And what's interesting about what this is I thought it was going to actually be David Attenborough talking about human beings. I thought like that would be so cool. It's like It'd be so cool. Like, I don't know if you ever watched.
Because people always joke about that, right? Like people always joke about, if you were to sit in a mall.
Yeah,
like,
right.
That'd be hilarious if David Attenborough just narrated, people watching or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Did you watch Human Planet?
Human Planet. That sounds
I don't know.
familiar.
I don't know if that was David Attenborough narrated, but it was kind of in that same BBC realm. Like Planet Earth came out first, and then Life came out, and then after Life, the next big one was Human Planet.
Okay.
And I don't remember if it's David Attenborough that
I don't know
narrated that, but so there is a new documentary series coming out on Apple TV. Have you heard about this, by the way? It's this Apple TV. Yeah. So it's on Apple TV Plus. David Attenborough. And I watched the trailer the other day, and the thing is called The Year Earth Changed. Or no, that doesn't sound right. It's like the year. Yeah, maybe it is The Year Earth Changed. Anyway, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And the documentary starts off with the pandemic. Like it starts off.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like it's a pandemic related, documentary or something.
Totally. So it starts off with like how the pandemic hit and how everybody in the earth had to figure out how to survive, and in an instant cities were completely empty. And I was like, this is going to be so cool. It's going to be David Attenborough or whatever narrating what the pandemic has been like for human life.
And I mean, even better than that, probably shot in 4K by like a BBC film crew or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. But halfway through the trailer, unfortunately, my hopes were dashed. Not to discount this. Like this is probably still going to be amazing. Yeah. But it's not about human life, and it's not about it's not David Attenborough narrating our lives in the pandemic. It is kind of an interesting topic though. What it is, it's what happened, I guess when cities kind of like shut down and cleared out. From what I gathered from the trailer, I guess certain animals started coming out to play, basically.
Yeah.
They started taking over cities and everything like that. So I don't know if
there was a beaver in the Toronto subway a few weeks back. I don't know if you saw that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's because of all this.
this is your connection to it, is the one beaver on the subway in Toronto.
That's an example of nature coming back.
Yeah. So I guess I don't know. I mean, they showed New York in the trailer, but I don't know if it was animals coming out in New York. Like, I'll be honest. So yeah, talk about attention span. It was only like a 2-minute trailer, and as soon as I hit the animals, I hit stop and I stopped watching it actually.
Yeah.
So but yeah, The Year Earth Changed, Apple TV Plus. It's premiering at some point in the future. As always, we don't have any information about that. But yeah, narrated by David Attenborough, and there you go.
Nice. I have some car stuff because I don't know if we haven't really talked about car stuff outside of maybe electric stuff. But first news item. Let's continue on the electric stuff. I don't know if you've been hearing about some of the early kind of reviews and impressions from the Ford Mustang Mach E. But there's some issues apparently emerging.
Okay.
I don't know if you can guess where the issues lie, if you were to kind of guess.
Okay, let's play this game here.
Yeah.
All right. I will have 3 guesses. How about that? Well, let me ask you this: are all the issues related to one thing, or are there multiple things here that I'm trying to guess?
Pretty much one thing. Like, I mean, there's some minor stuff, but I would say there's like a theme.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are issues, or are these problems that people have with the car? Or sorry, is it the reviewer saying like, "Oh, I didn't like this," or is it like people who own the car are like, "This thing is going wrong"?
Yeah. So there seems to be more owners.
Okay.
And so once the people have had some time to actually experience and use it for a while. So it seems to be not the reviews, but the day-to-day kind of.
My first guess is going to be battery related.
No, not battery. Not the battery itself. There's some stuff, but it's not directly related to the battery. But yeah, I'll give you.
Infotainment.
I close. Yeah, I think that's getting there. Yeah.
Okay. Is it just like the digital interface?
Pretty much. I was software basically.
Okay,
It seems.
okay.
And so, yeah, there's some everything from some minor issues. This is actually courtesy. Initially got a heads up from our good friend that you've never met, Dylan.
Yeah.
But an owner making a video, and I'll start with the things that are not prevent you from driving, which is annoying, and so it seems like all these issues stem from basically the really software based things that Ford's trying to do that basically you would expect in an electric vehicle, right? And companies like Tesla and whatnot, they've kind of had this for a while. But one example is use your phone as a key, right? And so
Okay, yeah.
you install the app, whatever, sign in, and then you're supposed to be able to walk up to the vehicle, and it opens. It doesn't really do that.
Yeah.
Like 80% of the time, apparently, it doesn't actually open immediately.
That's a pretty large percentage.
So this is just one owner's experience. So yeah, I don't know if that was just an issue. So then she has to load up the app and open the car. That's not super ideal, right?
Yeah.
And then whenever you get in, apparently sometimes it doesn't recognize that you have your phone, which is the key, and so you just can't drive away. You just basically have to go through the same process to somehow tell the car you have the key.
Yeah.
And the other thing that seems like, again, I don't know how they're going to fix this, because even if they have, because some of the stuff you can hope that they fix it over software updates, right? Because that's something that Tesla pioneered, and I think Ford is doing with the Mach E as well, which is similar to your iPhone. You can just get a software update and it'll fix bugs and things like that. Mm-hmm. But the one big issue that seems like super annoying is, I don't know if you've seen the interior. There's a pretty big, screen, like touch screen.
It's got that little physical dial in the middle.
The physical volume in the middle. So I think the layout and the UI, at least if you just look at it statically, everything seems fine. But just from this, at least one video, the lag was crazy. And so, everything works, but there's a delay. There's a 1 or 2 second delay when you're moving stuff around.
Okay.
The boot up time, it takes 10 seconds to boot up, after you start the car. So, I mean, this stuff is just, maybe they're going to fix it because it's still new, right? It's still very early, but I don't have that. I feel that's a very hard thing to fix, right? Like if you ship with a super laggy, and it's not just one thing that's laggy, everything's kind of laggy.
The whole thing's
I feel that's really hard to fix because obviously that's some sort of architectural kind of issue.
Yeah.
The other stuff they can maybe fix, but it seems like there's a whole range of just really weird quirks and stuff that are really just software related. In the most severe case, apparently, some owners, the car will just die or not start. There's something wrong with the software managing the charging, and then they have to go to the dealer to kind of get figured out.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is I want to say I'm not surprised, but I'm also I'm kind of disappointed because it's, I think this is kind of probably the hardest part of the non-Teslas of the world trying to get into electric vehicles, right? It's really the software element, and it's unfortunate that I actually had high hopes for Ford because I feel like Ford, they've had some interesting infotainment stuff in the past, and I feel like out of all the companies, maybe they had a better shot at making a usable software platform, but it seems like they're having some pains right now. But yeah, that's the news on the Mach E.
I wonder. I mean, there's a part of the software engineer in me says, well, you know what, that's software, and they will fix it and they'll address it, and kind of they've released it, and maybe that's a good thing, and of all the things to go wrong, maybe software is the one thing that they can actually kind of falter on the first try and just kind of keep improving it. But what's kind of interesting is that it's almost flipped now in terms of what it's almost like when people talk about Tesla, it seems like the number one thing that they seem to talk about is the one thing that they don't have is they haven't really perfected the mass market production line, right? It's it's car companies have assembly lines is what I mean. Like car companies of I want to say yesteryear for some reason. Car companies, traditional car companies have been doing, mass market assembly lines for years, and they perfected every single little like it's probably one of those things like what's that like ISO standard or something like that where it's like it's like to a millimeter of error or stuff like that or whatever. They have everything that like that. And like their quality assurance is incredible or whatever. And everyone talks about, like Tesla is a newer company. So even though the cars are amazing, maybe their quality control isn't quite up to snuff to the old companies or whatever, right? But it sounds like this is kind of the reverse situation. It's like Tesla has had now many years of software testing and software upgrading and getting that software part right. And traditional car companies have not, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like this is something that they still need to iron out. They still need to get the kinks like, does the Mach E at least offer over-the-air updates? Do you know?
So it does. I believe it does. And so again, let's wait and see. The one issue is like, just because a company says they offer over-the-air updates doesn't actually mean they can do it, right? And so one thing that so a little bit disappointing news again from Porsche is the Taycan is supposed to support some level of over-the-air update, but apparently, you know how like iOS has the latest, like major updates, right? Like iOS 13, 14, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, for the latest software update of the Taycan, you actually have to take it to the dealer. Like you can't do it over the air. So maybe you can do some of the like incremental software updates, but you can't do the major updates. So that again, right. I think. This we'll have to wait and see. I think these companies are still trying to figure that out. But I agree with you. It's like, the more electric vehicles and the more kind of new things companies are trying, the better. They should get these things out early. But I think, it is difficult with vehicles and software because, again, the bar is already set, right? Like if you trying to set your climate control super laggy, that's a way worse experience than what you would get in a traditional car, right?
Yeah.
And another issue that this owner had was sometimes the reverse camera doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so it would just say like reverse camera not available.
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty big deal, because it like you don't want that to be a bug, right? That's something that should be fairly solid.
Well, this is the thing we kind of talked about in the past, right? How like one of the when we talk about the trade-offs between like going digital and all that stuff like that, we talked about this in the past, how one of the things you forget about is like reliability, right? Where it's like, a pencil and a paper, no matter where your signal will work, right? It's reliable that way, right? So I think the problem with digital things like this, is we forget about the reliability. For example, so our car, right? It's a digital dash, right? Yeah. And the nice thing about a non-digital dash is the speedometer is very reliable, right? Like our car, I can count at least 5 times where while driving, our entire digital dash just shuts off. It goes black, and we're basically driving blind at that point. Like we have no information about how fast we're going or anything like that. Yeah. And my parents' car, same thing. Like they're like, I mean, they didn't have a digital dash, but they had the main front screen.
Yep.
And so much was controlled through that, and including things like the backup camera, where it's just like no signal. Yeah. And it's like, well, what the heck do you do at that point, right? Yeah. So I mean, I think there are certain things where they're luxuries, and if the luxury goes down, it's okay. Like again, if our radio stops working, if whatever, right?
Yeah.
But if you can't tell what speed you're going while you're driving, like that's not great, right? Like that's
and that's the thing is like the move towards these systems being so all encompassing, right? Like it used to be that these were kind of isolated, and then you had your primary systems, some, not digital or software, right? Yeah. So I think it's a really high bar, and like again, I think the what will really kind of dictate the success of these companies is these things happen with Teslas, right? Like, I bought a Tesla very early on in its production cycle, and there was a bunch of software bugs, right? Yeah. But I think the thing that Tesla gets right is, again, because they really are closer to a software company, right, than, a car manufacturer, a lot of those issues were fixed in some cases, like within 3 days, like super quickly, and you would just get the update. So I think this is like, again, they need to be really fast and responsive with these. And I think that could be a bit tricky because I don't see these companies as being kind of like, agile software development companies, right?
Sure. Yeah. Totally.
So I think
they're almost the polar opposite, right? Like it's weird because like pre-software, right? Engineering was very much like something you had to get right. Yeah, you had to
Yeah.
go through a lot of testing and a lot of things, and then like again, it was one of these things where these like development cycles of a car were probably like years in advance, right? They're probably like, the design is probably finished years before they're released or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And like all this stuff, because I mean that was one of these cases where like you can't get like the mechanical engineering wrong. You can't like you can't release faulty mechanical engineering, right? So they're kind of more ingrained in that. So it's interesting, like that intersection. Like, how do you marry a very rigid like engineering process with a very agile like engineering process, right?
Yeah, which I mean is a big challenge, like, right? It's one of the big challenges with software development as well, right? To move quickly, but to make sure that your tests and everything and your requirements kind of hit. It's interesting. I will say, I think after hearing all this, again, I almost think that I would love to have seen like Ford's foray into electric vehicles here. I almost feel that maybe they were too influenced by Tesla, right? Like again, like a lot of these things are awesome, and I love them in the Tesla. But I would almost prefer if like Ford came out with something that wasn't trying to do your phone is the key and you have this huge entertainment. If they just made a really great electric vehicle that was still in terms of like controls and how you interact and engage with it, like a traditional vehicle, right? Because otherwise, if you don't do that, it's a very hard thing to do, right? To just jump immediately to let's try to do the Tesla kind of model, right? So
it's true, like, because I mean, like, again, Ford is one of these companies. I feel like you're right with things like I don't know, like the GT, right? And like where no other car companies seem to kind of be doing stuff that they were doing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I know you make a good point. It would have been really interesting if they weren't just trying to do like following suit with a Tesla, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. So
Cool.
that's the update on the Mach E, but we'll keep an eye on that.
So kind of continuing on car news. So interestingly, Spotify has been kind of doing some interesting stuff. So I think Spotify is starting to try to expand their horizons a bit, not just in their music, like, because like obviously they're big music streamer. I think they might be still higher than Apple Music in terms of the number of subscribers.
I think so.
Yeah. So obviously a really big influence there, and I don't mean things like adding podcasts and stuff like that, because that's still in the whole. It's all in the same realm, right? But they're starting to branch out a little bit, I think, to kind of be a bit of a bigger player outside of what they normally do. So one of the things that's kind of related to what you're talking about is kind of in one of these kind of traditional leaks, like how some leaks come out because there's references to like things in code, basically.
Oh yeah.
Right, like Apple things will leak because it's like, oh, there's something in the code that references a 28-inch iMac and that doesn't exist today or whatever, right? So I think there's something in their code right now that's referencing a car thing, which is kind of obviously ambiguous at this point, but there's speculation that Spotify is getting into some kind of car hardware that
Interesting.
we'll do some kind of integration. And what's really interesting about all this is they just launched really weird, they launched their own voice assistant.
I and this is not like the news over the last week or so. I mean, I've had to be cautious because you never know, but I did hear about this, like a Hey Spotify, basically, right?
Exactly, yeah. So what's weird, I guess what's weird about this versus other voice assistants is it's not OS wide, right? So like you have to be in the app and listening to the app. But I guess what's interesting about it is, I mean, the more focused a product is, the better it could theoretically be, right? So theoretically, if you're doing Hey Spotify is very tuned to just Spotify stuff, right? So theoretically, it could have a lot more capability than Siri or Google Assistant could have for Spotify, right? So what their speculation is here too is that now that they have this car thing and they have Hey Spotify, is that once it's kind of all hooked up in your car, you could then do some Hey Spotify stuff to kind of play your music or whatever, right? So
interesting.
Some kind of interesting things happening with Spotify there. So And then the big news on the Apple front, kind of out of not really out of nowhere, but without a big fanfare splash. I feel like Apple introduced a pretty big thing this week. The Find My network. So you heard about this?
Yeah, I haven't. I don't know the details, so I'm glad that
Yeah.
you're bringing it up with all the details, right? So
Yeah, I actually do. I actually do know a decent amount about this,
Nice.
surprisingly. So I mean, this podcast should basically be called "If it's Apple news, we actually know stuff. If it's anything else, we don't."
yeah,
So for the longest time, there have been rumors that Apple was going to release what are called AirTags, right?
yes,
So,
that's right.
So for those FDK, it's there's a company called Tile who does the same thing, but basically these like kind of Bluetooth beacons.
Is Tile still around? Are they?
Tile is still around.
They're still around. Okay.
And they're heavily threatened by this, obviously.
Yeah.
And they're basically, FDK, like Tile are basically these tiny little beacons that you can attach to anything. You can throw them in your purse, you can throw them on your keys, whatever. And the idea is that you can track these things, through a Bluetooth signal. So for the longest time, there has been this rumor that Apple is going to release AirTags, which is basically their version of this. So, you could attach these to a bunch of things, and then kind of go with it. Now, what's interesting is this rumor has been around for at least a couple of years at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
And still no word of it, basically. And then things start showing up in the code where like you could add items to the Find My app. So you can't just find your phone and Mac and all stuff like that, but you can find these little AirTags. I don't know if these AirTags are still gonna happen. Maybe they are, but what Apple has seemingly done to launch first, is they've opened up a third-party accessory thing to integrate with Find My. So it's kind of like a certification process. You have to be certified by Apple, and then there's a made for iPhone kind of thing. But basically any third party can sign up for this thing, and then they would have things that can be tracked through Find My. Right. And what's kind of cool is it's not just Bluetooth. If you like, there's stuff too with like the W1 chip and stuff like that, the spatial awareness and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the first three products that were introduced is Belkin introduced some AirPod-like wireless buds that can be tracked through that. There is a company that starts with a G that makes bikes. I don't know if you know them.
This is I don't know the name of the company, but this is the one. That's where I kind of saw this news kind of come up.
Yeah,
that use case of a lot of bikes now, especially there's a bunch of electric bicycles on the market. So they assist you like pedaling, so you don't have to just pedal on your own power. You can get some electric assistance, and now they're coming with some simple computers on board and stuff like that. So that's a one use case. And obviously, if you have a $2,000 bike or whatever, that's a pretty good security feature, right? If you can kind of keep track of it. Yeah,
exactly. So you can keep track of it. And then there's the third item, which I totally don't remember. So there's some third item that's happened. And
this actually makes a lot of sense. Like I think because we've been hearing about this for a long time, and I think there's been different kind of ways it was proposed that it was going to be implemented. But I actually get why maybe it's only now happening, right? And I think one big reason you mentioned is I actually don't know if this is gonna be Bluetooth based. Like Apple, I forget what iPhone was, it the 10 or maybe the 11, but not that long ago they started introducing this new wireless chip.
Yeah,
and what it's supposed to do, and again, there's not a lot of applications yet, but actually I think the first application was actually the handoff, the HomePod Mini handoff.
Okay, yeah, right.
But basically, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, whatever. None of those things previously were good enough to really, at a very low power but high accuracy, detect distance and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And even with Tile, like I'm assuming with Tile, like it probably isn't perfect, and you have to like pair each thing, right? You have to pair the devices. Whereas you and I are both familiar with how nice setting up a pair of AirPods is, right? Because they have that special chip. You don't have to go through that pairing kind of process.
Yeah, it's this ultra wideband thing, right? So
exactly, yeah.
I kind of looked up on YouTube a little bit about what it was, but you're right. Like ultra wideband, the interesting thing is it is still kind of an infant technology.
Yeah, and there probably not that many phones out there until the last year or so, right? Because it takes a few years for like the new iPhones and the new generation of phones to kind of get out there. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming maybe now is like basically they're seeing enough devices out there, because I think this would rely on, I guess Tile does this too, right? Where the whole theory behind this is that if you have enough devices out there, so iPhones out there that are capable of, communicating with any of these tags, right? Then, if your bike gets stolen, you just like your bike just has to be close by with someone with an iPhone, right?
Yeah.
So they needed enough iPhones, I guess, with this technology first before they could kind of get a reliable network, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sad reality for Tile, and I kind of feel sorry for them for this, is like I think they had that vision, and they had this thing like the Tile community, and like if you've ever lost anything, you'll find it. But the sad reality is they just probably don't have the critical mass for that to actually be effective, right?
And trust too, right? Like with Apple, like I think they're probably gonna figure out a way to do it where it's high trust. You probably don't have to do anything, whereas with Tile, you probably have to like opt into it. You have to install it. It's like running. Whereas Apple could probably just run it in the background, like more passively.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Like, I think this is like, it's the sad thing again, because these small companies and these startups and stuff, like, they have great ideas, but it's like, you just need a gigantic conglomerate.
It's really difficult.
Like, to just go in and just like, it's kind of like what Apple did with the health kit and like all those studies. It's like, just because everybody has an iPhone in their pocket, you could get massive numbers for these medical studies or whatever. Right. So, if you have an iOS device, it rolled out like literally this week. So if you go into your Find My app, you can literally see add items, and you can start adding items today.
That's super cool.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back after this. And we are back on this wonderful Thursday, April 8th, 2021, episode 64 of the ETC podcast, the third last episode of season 7. We hope you guys have enjoyed. Is it season 7 or season 8? I can't even remember now. Anyways,
8 sounds too high.
Yeah, 8 does sound too high. We're gonna take a break after April 22nd, and keep your eyes on the Twitter feed to see when we return. If you want to get in touch with us, be sure to email us at podcast.etc@gmail.com. We did get reached out to this week by a company.
Keep the streak going.
They found our YouTube channel, and they want us to be part of their network of people who sponsor and review things. Clearly they did not really watch our channel, because we don't do anything close to that.
Are we getting free stuff? Is that what they're offering, or do they want free stuff?
You know what's weird? Like I really don't want to do this, because again, I think there's sketchy things with YouTube networks and stuff like that. But yeah, I think if we signed up, we could probably get free things to review and things like that. So if they can make us a deal where we get the free things and we don't actually have to sign up to be part of their network, that would be pretty good. So definitely interested. It's kind of cool to receive these emails, because like honestly, the number of views we get on YouTube, it's just like, I'm surprised anybody finds us, really, to be honest. So that being said, I do enjoy doing this stuff. So
yes,
I was too lazy to check our Twitter feed about Do Your Thing. So let's just jump straight into it. What is on Aaron's noggin for this wonderful Thursday, April 8th, 2021? And it sounds like he has something.
Yeah, I mean, I have something that I'm curious to get your take on it and your kind of perspective as well. But so let's start with this. I don't know if you've heard. You and I aren't really active Facebook users. I don't even know if you have an account.
I have an account, but very rarely.
I don't know if you heard this. This is not the first time, but there's been a leak, another data leak. Really? Facebook. This one was pretty large, actually. I think 500 million people, which is, again, it's like a bananas number, right? Like that's
wow.
There's not that many companies out there that could have a leak that big. But what's crazy is for Facebook is like it's not even half of their users or something.
Right.
Like, so that Facebook's kind of at a huge scale, but. So a lot of data leaked, and I don't know what exactly.
When did this happen? Like I read some article that Facebook was down. I didn't realize it was a big leak. When did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with these leaks is often they're revealed much later than when the breach happened, because Facebook themselves, I don't know when they found out about it, and they have to do investigation. So I'm not. Like it says here, it could be as far back as like 2019 potentially. So yeah, I don't know if this was like a long running kind of breach or a one time thing. But anyways, yeah, pretty big data leak. I think the main kind of leak in this one is actually phone numbers. A lot of people have phone numbers associated with their Facebook account. Yeah. So again, not great. And like, if Facebook, one of the biggest companies out there, right? Like you would think that if anyone could figure out how to prevent this stuff, it'd be them, but apparently not, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's kind of it's kind of like. Just like I feel like this happens like every few months there's like a leak and it's almost like we're getting kind of desensitized to it and I think one thing I don't know if you get this but thank God for Apple's feature on iOS to block unknown callers,
right?
Because I probably get like 5 a day or something. I don't know if you get these scam calls or whatever.
It's basically the only people who call me right now are
right. Yeah, like I look at my call list, right, and it's like 90%. And so like I'm assuming it's from leaks like this, right, because they need to get the number somehow,
right.
And so like it's just kind of disappointing because it's like I don't even use Facebook anymore.
Yeah,
but I'm like suffering like the consequences, right? Of like
have you deleted your account?
I haven't, but like, at this point, I feel like it wouldn't make a difference because all the data, all my data's out there anyways, right? So, and I've removed a lot of this personal information. So I think like, that leak must have been from a while ago. So, so I don't know. Like, I think like this is really interesting. Like again, identity. I think this is going to become more and more of an issue, right? Like basically the concept of your identity being out there, right?
Yeah.
And it being. Like it used to be, like, in kind of the, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but, when Facebook first came out, like, I feel like, you and I probably were fairly early users of like Facebook, right? When it first started.
Super early. We were before they opened it outside of schools.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like we moved from that era was kind of awesome because, you having your identity on there was actually kind of cool, right?
Oh, man. It was...
Yeah.
I remember my very first interaction, not my first interaction, but my first use of Facebook. So our good friend Dave, who we talk about a lot on the podcast, we may as well call this the Dave podcast at this point. He let me know about it. I think maybe both of us. I can't remember. Maybe. And I remember like going on there, and this is back in the time when you're like, I'm so cool. I want to say
you want to like all your information, like what you're eating, what you're doing, like
totally. So I remember filling out like my favorite movies or something like that, and then it instantly became a link. It was like favorite movies, and then A Beautiful Mind was clickable. So I was like, okay, I'll click.
Yeah,
and it's like, whoa, like I find all these people who love A Beautiful Mind. Yeah. So I think that propelled me to think I want to fill out everything on here. So 100% know what you're saying there.
And so like that was really like at the time, very, very nascent, and identity was actually something you wanted to get out there, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So it's really weird because I feel like that has almost been flipped around now. It's almost now you don't want your identity out there, right?
Totally.
And I even see like again like the very infrequent times when I'm on Facebook, usually when somebody is trying to message me or something. I've noticed over the past few years more and more people are not using their real names and real identities, right? That's become more of a common thing. Reddit is one of the biggest and fastest growing social networks, and predominantly on Reddit, people don't use their identity, right? They use like pseudonyms and stuff like that. So it's really interesting that shift away, right?
Well, I've even noticed like, as we get older, like, more and more of our friends have kids, and like, I notice like a lot of, parents are like, don't take pictures of my kids. I don't want my kids on any kind of social media. And I even when I'm sharing like pictures of kids with like other people that we know, I'm always a little bit hesitant and ask the parents, like, are you okay if I share this image or whatever?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
There is a really good kind of vigilance. Is vigilance the right word? I can't remember. Like in terms of like not putting yourself on the internet in any way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, it's a bit like I look at this and, I guess it was inevitable because, maybe early on it wasn't a big deal because there was not a lot to gain, right? From, maybe hacking the stuff and whatnot. But I think it's almost like maybe this is really going to be the downfall to the kind of Facebook model of social network where, inevitably, because identity is such a key part of that, and as the network grows, you get into more like Facebook got into more and more serious things, right? Like you could pay, you could buy stuff, right? You can do all this stuff, right? And I think that's when that's when it becomes a bigger target, right? For
Yep.
people to compromise the data and steal things. So yeah, it's really interesting. I really wonder. Like it's a bit sad because I think I had nothing against. Like I actually kind of really like the idea of having your true identity and like really networking with folks and especially your friends and stuff like that, right? But I feel like that's kind of gone. And so it will be interesting to see. Like I basically now, like even myself, I wish I could basically operate without any of my information, publicly identifiable, right? Like if I could go back in time, I would not use my phone number anywhere, right?
Yep.
But it's really hard. There's very few options to do that, right? Because when you sign up for something like, like a lot of apps, the sign up nowadays is just a phone number, right? Like Uber Eats, right? It's a phone number, and you need the phone number because sometimes they'll message you and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Like Apple started to do a little bit of this on the identity side. Like I don't know if you tried Apple like sign up, where they won't share any information to the service.
The other parties,
yeah, but they'll use a like kind of a pseudo like email that routes, right?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
So I actually wish there was something for phone numbers like that.
Yeah.
Because like again, I 90% of the calls I get are just scam calls now, and you can actually do a lot with a phone number, right? Like a lot of services still use like the two-factor auth and stuff like that. And so like there's a pretty scary hack out there that's actually like not super hard for people to do, which is it's just called like the SIM swapping. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
Have you ever had to get a new SIM card?
Yes.
So like let's say you're with like a whatever like phone company, right?
Yeah.
It's not that hard to do, right? Like I don't know if you remember, like you basically have to give them some details and they give you a new SIM card attached to that number, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so what this like hack is a kind of social engineering, but like as long as they have a few details on you, they'll just phone the like Rogers or whoever pretending to be you, and then they'll get a new SIM. And when they have a new SIM, all your like two-factor messages and stuff start going to that phone, right? It's super dangerous, totally. Right? So yeah, I just think that like it is sad where we ended up, but I feel like it'll be interesting to see where things evolve, because I don't think we can go back. Like I think there's no way we're going to go back to Facebook 10 years ago, right? Like that world doesn't exist anymore. But I feel like we still haven't gotten to the point where there's enough tools out there so you can effectively use something like Facebook or all these services without giving away your your personal identity.
Yeah. Well, I think there's kind of three things that came to mind there. First of all, kind of unrelated to what we're actually talking about. I'm surprised, just thinking about the SIM swap thing. I'm surprised actually, like just general cellular data, like being sent to the proper device. I'm surprised that is as trusted as it is. Like,
right.
Like I don't know how cell phone signals work, and I don't know how SIM cards work and all that stuff like that. But I'm surprised that you can't receive somebody else's data. Like I feel like that should be hackable, and I'm surprised it hasn't been hacked at this point.
Data is not like data's not too hackable, just because everything goes over like HTTPS for the most part, right?
Right.
So like it's no different. Like there are things I can basically these first were used for Wi-Fi networks, where if you're in a coffee shop, you can actually get a device that sits between the router in the coffee shop and everything connecting to it, right? So everything in the coffee shop thinks it's connecting to the coffee shop, but it's actually connecting to your router. It's not that big of a deal, because all they're going to see is, for the most part nowadays, encrypted traffic, right?
Yeah.
And that's really hard to crack. Like maybe the government can do that. But like, they could still like, know what sites and stuff you're visiting. They don't know what what data you're sending, but they can still know what sites. But I think things like text messaging, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That is a lot easier. Call. Yeah.
Like I'm surprised like that hasn't been exploited more, where it's like all of a sudden phone calls are not coming to my phone, they're going to somebody else's phone, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. The second thing though, it's like I know a lot of this stuff is like, like obviously malicious people kind of exploiting, kind of Facebook's like security holes and stuff like that. But I think like companies like Facebook, I think they're starting to show the cracks in their business model, basically, right? Like
Yeah.
this kind of goes back to the social dilemma, which we talked about, where it's like companies that feed on effectively something that is not good. It's like they're feeding on people's data to sell advertising. It's not really changing the world for the better, right? Like
Yeah.
they're that's their business model. I feel like that is starting to crack now, right? It's like people are getting smarter, and the companies that don't rely on that are exploiting like the opposite of that. They're like now again, iOS, like now all these apps are like you have to let people know if you're tracking cross data and all this stuff like that, right? It's like, so I think the companies that are doing good in the world, that are selling good stuff and that are selling like productive stuff or whatever, they're gonna start to crack down on the ones who are ultimately selling bad stuff and like bad data and all this stuff. And these companies like Facebook, who their whole business model is exploiting human data and human behavior and all this stuff, I think they're either going to have to reinvent themselves or they're going to kind of falter, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
And yeah, that's a really good point. And again, regardless of the ethics, because I wouldn't, I think it's hard to say like, Facebook's trying to be bad or evil or whatever, right? Like I don't think that's like, even if that's what their actions show, right?
Yeah.
And they haven't done anything about it, like it's obviously not their goal, right? Like their goal is not let's do something bad, right? Their goal is to run a business, right?
Yeah.
But like you said, I think they're in a really tough spot. I'm really not sure how they get out of this, in terms of like without losing a lot of their value.
Yeah.
Which is basically, again, Facebook, one of the biggest companies out there, a ton of smart people working there. Like they could hire thousands and thousands of engineers to fix a lot of these things. But again, the reason Facebook works, right? Because again, there's a lot of advertising, there's a lot of interconnected like services and stuff like that, is because identity is such a big deal, right? Like, if you like, again, security is actually very easy at the end of the day. If you eliminate all this like personal data and stuff, and don't have any of this, like it's very secure, right? Like, you don't have anything to leak, right?
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
Facebook ceases to work as a business as well, right?
But
if they do that.
Yeah, but you know what I think the problem is here? Like the problem is, I think, and again, like we talked about this on another episode, where it's like it's this vicious cycle that somebody set the precedent for in the beginning. I don't know who it was. Like maybe it was Google. Maybe Google really is to blame here, because some company at some point in the software history realized that the best way to make money off software is to not charge for the software and make money off the advertising, right? And the problem is this set, again, this vicious cycle of users not wanting to pay for stuff, right?
Yeah.
And software companies kind of being cornered to be like, the only way we can charge or make money off of people is by doing things that they're not really knowing, like they don't really know they're being made money off, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like you look at what is it? Hello? Is that what it was? Was that what it was called?
Are you talking about or
No, the email thing.
oh, hey,
from base,
like the email
exactly,
from
right?
37 Signals, like Basecamp.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like I kind of respect what they were trying to do, and ultimately like it's almost like software kind of should have been that way all the time. Like from the beginning, it's almost like Google should have charged us to use the search engine, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost and so that all software wasn't based on us not knowing what they're doing.
But
with
they
our
would
data.
have, like, it's a catch-22, because they would never have gone like all these products and networks, right? Google, Facebook, they get better the more people are on it, the more usage and activity there is. And so it's a bit of a catch-22, because Google would never have gotten to the scale they are if they didn't offer free search, right?
That's a good point, right? And yeah, so it's tough, because like I ultimately think Facebook is full of a lot of really brilliant minds, and because like we get to see that from the software side. Like they've released some of the most impressive software libraries and software development, and I ultimately think Zuckerberg, like I don't know a ton about him, but I get the impression that he's basically a really good software engineer who got in over his head, right? It's like I get the impression that he knows how to develop amazing stuff, and he knows amazing products. But then he was put at the forefront to become this like business CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world, and like they were kind of forced into doing stuff that is maybe
there's I mean there's no way
right?
there's no way he would have predicted that, you know, the thing he built would be responsible for, like, you know, allegedly manipulating the elections, US elections, right? Like there's no way that he would have predicted that, but that's, you know, ultimately he's had to, you know, evolve to play that role, right? To be the head of a company that has to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's why I still think like why Social Dilemma is such a important movie for people to watch. Like again, the whole drama side's a little weird, and there's some creative decisions that are a little weird. Yeah. But the information that's being divulged in Social Dilemma and from the people who built it, it's like that's a very like important thing I think that people need to understand, right? So
and ultimately, you know, like a lot of this is new in terms of human history, right? But at the end of the day, like you're right, you know, you can't just go and say, hey, the companies did all this bad stuff and, you know, they're 100% to blame. Ultimately, there's, you know, human history has been full of things in the world that are really dangerous for people, right?
Yeah.
And so like at the end of the day, it's ultimately the people who use it it's really their responsibility to educate themselves. And, you know, sometimes you unfortunately learn the hard way, but I think this is just going to become one of those things where, like, you know, at some point, and that's why, you know, things like Social Dilemma are really good. There has to be a certain level of education and like people like educating themselves on, you know, best practices and what's safe, right? You can't just always blame,
oh, totally.
You know, like, you know, Facebook did all this stuff. Like, well, yeah, to some extent they enabled it, but the people that are using it, you know, ultimately Facebook wouldn't exist unless those people were on the network, right? So
I guess the tricky thing is, right, is that companies like Facebook, I think, like the really tricky thing is it's almost like the cigarette industry, right? At this point, where it's like they are very well aware of what they're doing at this point, right? And they're well aware of the power they have, and they're well aware of like the business they have. I think so that's where it gets a little bit like tricky, right? Where I definitely agree. There is responsibility on the user. There's responsibility on the public, but you know, it's kind of like it's weird. It's almost like like Facebook is almost like, and Google and all these things are kind of like the asbestos of our time, right? It's like it's stuff that we think is really good and people use it and don't understand, but then you all of a sudden find out actually this is kind of bad. This is not really good, but now the problem is, I guess, like companies like Facebook and Google and stuff like that. Are they like, you know, they understand this is going on, they're continuing to do it. Now, what complicates things, I think, is that like it's tricky because these companies are also offering very much real value to our lives.
Yeah.
That's unrelated to the money engine.
Yeah.
You know, that's allowing this to happen. Yeah. Right. That's the
thing.
Part.
They're so intertwined with. I don't think it's completely a harmful substance. Like I don't think it's because I think it would almost be like I don't know what the comparable like thing would be, but there's very real social and human value that both these companies provide, right, alongside all that bad stuff, right? And so like I've heard stories of people reconnecting with friends they haven't seen in 20 years, right? Because of Facebook. Both companies are, giving a lot of access to information, especially to, again, underprivileged people, right? Like the fact that you can just type in something in Google and learn like anything out there is really powerful, right? So, it's really tricky because how do you separate, that from, all the kind of negative aspects of that? I don't think anyone has an answer yet, but I honestly think it's just balance. Like I think you're right to some degree. These companies need to, get to a better spot. Maybe the government's gonna step in a bit. I don't know. Like there has to be some responsibility on that side. But I think also on the consumers, like people will get smarter, people will get more sophisticated, right? Like people will learn how to use, not their real identity, but to not put their phone number out there and stuff. I think eventually we'll get there. It's just I think we're in a bit of a weird transition period.
But again, I think projects like Hey are kind of like a little bit the answer. It's like it's up to these companies, I think, to find a way to continue to offer the amazing services and value that they offer, but try to find a different money engine, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To find just like, I mean, I mean, maybe it's still within the advertising realm, but it doesn't depend so much on personal data, right? Like,
which is so one company. Again, all these companies, like all the big companies, I think there's always an angle you can look at it in terms of like all the evil they do, right? But I actually think, and maybe it's because they have more options, in terms of their business. But I think Amazon is actually a good example of like a company that most people wouldn't say is like a good company, like like an altruistic company. But they figure out a way to like even though they're still making money in a lot of bad ways. I feel like they've also figured out a way to keep making a lot of money in ways that are, not just solely reliant on that, right? So
yeah, it's true.
Like they're very well known for really bad practices in terms of their marketplace, right? Like, like back in the day when they did books, like they'd basically put bookstores out of business and like bully them.
Yeah.
And a lot of products on there right now, if you have different manufacturers, they'll basically try to bring down the cost so that one survives and the rest dies. Like a lot of bad things on the marketplace. But then, there's things like AWS for developers and all the other revenue streams, which are a little bit more like, like good, I guess, right? Like they're less,
you're right.
a little less evil, right? Because they're more pure. Because when you use AWS, you have to pay for it, right? Like you have to pay money to use that service. So I feel like they've kind of figured it out. But yeah, I think Google, Facebook, they're a little bit more. They're still reliant on what they were from the start.
Yeah, and that's a great example, right? That's a super good example because you think Facebook, for example, like developing React, like the entire world is like a huge amount of the world is using React right now.
Yeah.
And it's like if they found a way to monetize the usage of React, which by the way, I think a lot of people would be willing to pay a little bit for it, right? It's like, that's a pretty good thing. That enables people to create amazing software and build amazing, things that change the world, right? And again, I don't think advertising is inherently bad. Don't get me wrong. Like I think advertising is a fine thing. I think it's a good thing. But if it's at the cost of people losing their privacy, that's where it starts to get a little bit. And not to mention if it's done in a way that's a little bit like secretive, like that's not great either, right? So So anyways, it's a tricky thing. Like I mean, it's not an easy problem to solve, and I am very much part of the problem. I'm in that vicious cycle of now that I know how much is for free, like I instantly did not want to pay for Hey. Like the instant I found Hey was like, and it's not even that much, right? It's like $10 a month or something like that. Yeah. Almost right away, I was like, nope, this is not for me.
Yeah. There's a lot of like again, to pull you away from what you're used to and switch, right? Like, it's a big ask. And to be honest, like, I think it's for a lot of people, it's an easier ask to educate themselves on how to protect their, online identity rather than pay for a service that doesn't, abuse that.
Well, it's interesting because I wonder if that will force these companies to figure that out then, right? Because if more and more of the population, like it's interesting because this new pop-up that Apple brings up about sharing your data or whatever, it's one of the first alerts that I majorly say no to. Like, do you want push notifications? Sure. Do you want this and that? Sure. Share my photos? Sure. All the stuff like that. But that one about cross-tracking apps is like, and I don't even care that much about it, but I was like, no, I don't want it. No, I don't want it. No, I don't want it. Right.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting if the majority of the population actually opts out of this stuff, and then these companies are forced to figure out other monetization models because everybody's just protecting their data at this point, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So anyways, I think all that to say, my number is out there apparently, and every day 5 calls from who knows where.
On that note, if you want to get in touch with us legitimately, be sure to email us at podcast.etc@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at the ETC Podcast, and subscribe and like our YouTube videos. Just search the ETC Podcast and Casey Lee or Aaron Sedanker, and you will find us. But we are coming to a close on this episode 64 for this wonderful Thursday, April 8th, 2021. The ETC Podcast is currently hosted on Anchor FM, but distributed to all your favorite podcast apps, including Spotify, Overcast, Apple Podcasts, and more. Like I said, if you want to get in contact with us, you can email us. You can leave a voice message at our official website, anchor.fm/ the-etc-podcast. But as for now, that is it for episode 64 of the ETC podcast for this wonderful Thursday, April 8th, 2021, episode 64, the third last episode of season 7. Thanks everybody for listening. My name is Casey Lee, and sitting across the city from me, as always, is
Aaron Zanenkar.
I finally nailed an ending.
Facebook as best as that's a good one.